This is a healthy coral reef. These are table corals in great shape. And a healthy reef will also have large amounts of branching corals, as you can see here. And it's these branching corals form an important habitat for much of the biodiversity, such as reef fish like this. But although these are healthy reefs, increasingly we are seeing evidence of coral bleaching events, and that this can lead to large areas of stressed reef, as we can see here. And these bleached corals can sometimes die in large areas. And a big question this creates is how reproductively viable are reefs as they get into smaller size classes. So here we have a pretty good reef, lots of corals, and they're each going to be able to release their bundles of eggs which mix on the sea surface. Very good chance of fertilisation success. But if there was only 2 corals, when they mix, there's much less chance that they're going to interact and fertilise. So this study is trying to investigate that question for small reefs. And here we are collecting real corals, these are table corals, from the reef, and then moving them into a new location. This is Nico Bay, where we're planning to set up our experiment to place some corals on the reef, or a made-up reef here, where there's no other colonies that could cross-fertilise them. Therefore, any of the eggs that get fertilised by that small cluster of corals would have to have come from the small cluster that we've moved there. So this is a distinct lagoon from the reef, which is outside, and this looks like a great spot to do the experiment. So Gary, tell us about when do corals spawn?
Well, I think every full moon is from March, and pickup is April, I think.
Yeah. Now, we've chosen our site in this lagoon, and we're now swimming across the reef looking for a suitable site, and we've picked this area of corals that won't be spawning now. Therefore, we can set up this experiment and create a grid of 20 corals, that's 5 by 4, with a 1 meter spacing. And so we're creating a small patch of reef, and these corals will hopefully spawn at a different time to the rest. And as you look across this, we have tagged the corals. They're only going to be on this reef for a few days, so although this environment, which is in the lagoon, is quite different, it shouldn't present too many problems for those corals. They're usually pretty tolerant at this point. And here we are attaching tags to the corals, making sure we know what's what. All right, so we're getting ready. Various containers on the boat. It's a beautiful evening. The wind is dying down. We hope that the corals are feeling in the mood. And we're off. But it turns out corals have a mind of their own, and on this particular evening nothing spawned at all. There was a tiny little burst of spawning, but that was it. So the following day we're heading back out to the site, and first of all just to check whether the corals are still in a gravid state, whether they still have eggs to spawn. Gerard is just tapping the corals to see if they still have eggs in them. So tell me, Gerard, what did you just see there?
Checked 2 corals and they both had eggs, and we checked the third one that had spawned the other night and had no eggs.
All right, that's what we like to see. The corals are ready. We'll go again. Okay, so last night we went out and we had about a quarter of the corals spawn successfully. But even then there were only a minor spawning, only some of them went. So we're hoping that tonight will be the night that they will release, and we'll be able to run the experiment. It's now about 6:15 local time in Palau. The wind has died down. These are classic symptoms of the conditions that precipitate spawning. So let's hope that tonight, 3 days after the full moon, they're going to go. So here is a coral at night, and if we look closely we can see egg bundles sitting right underneath the surface of the coral. Okay, it's just gone 8 p.m. We've been down on the reef and the corals have set. They're full of eggs. The eggs are being pushed up into the mouth of the polyps and they're going to release them in the next hour or so. So now we're just on the reef cataloguing how much of the coral is actually ready to go. And the next step is to bring one of the colonies up onto the boat so we have a supply of egg bundles that we can deploy onto the slick. And here they are. The egg bundles are drifting up within the bucket. So everything is spawning at this point in time. And here we have the sample jars ready to go. Okay, here's the coral, all of that spawn. We are sampling. What do you have to say for yourself, Adriana?
I'm so happy to be the collector of sperm samples.
All right, so these are our samples, and you probably can't see, but out there in the blue. And here we are collecting the containers with their eggs after an hour at sea. Well, we've just collected all of the samples. They've been drifting for an hour, and we picked up the controls. Everything was recovered successfully. Now we'll start taking them back to the lab and see if they were fertilized or not. But here's what they look like. The disco lights are now recovered and they're all here in the boat, and everybody's very happy about that. And Gerard is here fixing the samples with formalin so that we are good. This is what it looks like under a microscope. If you look closely, you can see these embryos. These are blastulae that are dividing. And if we look at this, we can see some, which we've marked here, are embryos. The rest are eggs that didn't fertilize. We found 8% of fertilization overall. So these small patches can contribute to the population.